Hello, amazing artists. Mrs. Hales here with another art lesson. Today we're going to be starting a 2-day project and we are going to be drawing and painting dragons. We are going to be inspired by one of my all-time favorite children's books called The Paper Dragon. Now, the cool thing about this book is it opens out it's a triptych. So each page looks like this and then it has a section that opens out. So I'm going to do my best to read it to you with the open sections. And then the other cool thing about this book is the illustrations are actually cut paper. So the artist intricately, his name is Robert Sabuda, he very intricately with a blade cut out all these great delicate cut paper illustrations. Let me read it to you and we'll get started. The Paper Dragon by Marguerite Davol. Long, long ago, there lived a humble artist named Mi Fei. Between each day's sunrise and sunset, Mi Fei would dip his narrow brushes in colored inks and paint on paper scrolls. He loved to paint the glorious past, scenes of gods and their festivals, portraits of great heroes and their deeds. People from far beyond his village came to buy his scrolls so they could learn about the gods and heroes as one would learn from books. But the artist cared nothing for the fame his paintings brought him. He was a simple man, content to live and work in his own village. When children crowded his windows to watch him paint, he would call to them, "Come in." When neighbors appeared at his door, he put his brushes aside, ready to listen to their latest tale of triumph or woe. Mi Fei was happy, surrounded by the people he loved. Then one morning, Mi Fei's work was interrupted by shouts outside his window. A messenger," people cried as they ran past. Brush in hand, Mi Fei rushed to join his neighbors in the village square. The messenger, Mu Wang, brought distressing news. The great dragon of Lung Mountain, Sui Jin, has awakened from his 100-year sleep and he is loose upon the land. He has trampled rice fields, and the winds created by his lashing tail have uprooted the mulberry trees, destroying all the silkworms. Sui Jin's fiery breath has scorched the tea leaves on the bushes. Villages everywhere are in ruins. Someone must face the dragon, Mu Wang warned the crowd. Someone must convince it to go back to sleep, or your village too will be crushed under the weight of Sui Jin. Frightened people murmured among themselves, was anyone in their village brave and clever enough to confront the dragon? One by one, they all turned to Mi Fei. "Well, you know all about the gods and heroes," one of the villagers said. "Surely you could find a way to stop Sui Jin." Mi Fei just shook his head. "I'm no hero," he protested, "only a simple artist who paints the past. All I know of heroic deeds has been told to me by others." But the village crowded around and pleaded for his help. Looking into their worried faces, he could not refuse them. Next morning, Mi Fei tucked some rice cakes into his pack, along with brushes, paper, and ink. He bundled up some of his painted scrolls to bring him comfort. He knew he might never see his friends and neighbors again. He looked around his beloved village one last time and set off for Long Mountain. He walked through valleys and across streams, stopping only to pick berries or quench his thirst at a spring. After many hours, he reached Long Mountain. Smoke and flames billowed from the mountaintop. Enormous rocks bounced down the steep slopes. He was frightened, but he climbed up until he stood at Lung Mountain's peak. Then through the mist, with a rumbling roar so loud, Mi Fei thought his head would burst, the dragon appeared. "Ha! Who dares disturb Sui Jin, the source of fire, the heart of the mountain?" Mi Fei trembled. He turned to run away, but the worried faces of the villagers filled his mind. So he turned back to face the dragon. He bowed low and managed to say, I am Mi Fei, a humble painter of scrolls." Bright fire spurted from the dragon's nostrils. The wind from its lashing tail nearly blew him off his feet, but somehow he was able to stand his ground. "Please, Sui Jin, the villages are in ruins. You have scorched the tea leaves, trampled the rice, leaving nothing for people to eat or drink. You've uprooted the mulberry trees, and the silkworms are dying, leaving nothing for people to wear or sell. I beg of you, return to your sleep of 100 years. Huge scales glistened as the dragon coiled itself into a tight circle. Its eyes glowed red. "Ha, Mi Fei, know that before I return to my ageless slumber, someone must perform 3 tasks. Until then," thundered the dragon, "I must prowl the countryside, trampling and burning everything in my path." Mi Fei sighed. Could a simple artist stop Sui Jin's devastation? His voice very small, Mi Fei asked the dragon, What are the 3 tasks?" Sui Jin's terrible teeth clicked. First, tell me, Mi Fei, the beast said, what is the most important thing your people have created? The artist answered this without thinking. Paper, he said, the paper on which I paint my scenes. Paper indeed, the dragon howled with laughter. Your first task, then, is to bring me fire wrapped in paper. Go do this before sunset, or I must devour you. Mi Fei crouched behind a large rock, seeking shelter from the dragon. He shook his head. How can I carry out this task? He said to himself. It's impossible. I was so foolish to say paper. Paper's important to me, but I should have said brass or tin. He looked down at the bundle of scrolls he had carried from his village. People far and wide learned of their history from paper. Scrolls or books, he thought. Perhaps knowing about the past can help me find answers for the present. He unrolled his scrolls and studied them. He smiled as he examined the scenes. He took out a small knife and cut the paper scroll, folding it and fashioning it into a different shape. Before the sun slid from sight, Mi Fei returned to face Sui Jin. Although nervous to be so close to the dragon, he took a candle stump from his pack and lit the wick from Sui Jin's fiery breath. Mi Fei placed the burning candle inside the paper lantern he had made. The dragon laughed, and the flame in his nostrils died to a wisp of smoke. Mi Fei knew he had succeeded. But then Sui Jin began to whip his heavy tail back and forth so violently that the clouds in the sky were swept away. Your second task is to bring me the wind captured by paper, the dragon roared. Do this before noon tomorrow, or I must devour you. Slept very little that night. He had solved the first task, but the second seemed far more difficult. Can my scrolls help me again? He asked himself over and over. In morning's orange glow, he unrolled his scrolls again, one after another. He stared at them, a hero's rescue of a beautiful princess lost in the hot desert. It gave him an idea. Quickly, he took out his small knife and cut the paper scroll, folding and fashioning it into a new shape. They found the dragon resting, his eyes closed. He approached the scaly beast and with the folded paper began to fan his face. The wind captured in the fan tickled Sui Jin. Opening its eyes, the dragon laughed once more and lazily uncoiled its massive tail. Mi Fei knew he had succeeded again, but almost instantly, Sui Jin opened his red, angry eyes wide and bellowed, Your third task is to bring me the strongest thing in the world carried in paper. Do this before sundown, or I must devour you. He hurried back to the shelter in the rocks. The strongest thing in the world, he repeated. Isn't that Sui Jin? Or this rock I'm leaning against? What huge, heavy thing could be carried in paper? His scrolls had saved him twice before, and once again he unrolled them, searching for an answer. But no matter how hard he looked, this time not one of the scrolls offered him a solution. He set them aside, disheartened. Surely Sui Jin will devour me at sundown, he said. Mi Fei reached into his pack and took out his brushes, paper, and inks. He began to paint, certain it would be for the last time. But he didn't paint scenes of gods or heroes. Instead, he painted what was closest to his heart and what he cherished most. He began to paint the people and friends of his village, young and old, men, women, and children. He worked until the sun arced low in the west and wearily laid his brushes aside. He looked at the familiar world he had recreated, the faces of the friends and neighbors he loved. Words began to crowd his head and take shape and become a poem. He picked up his brush and made that poem part of his painting. When he had finished, he looked for a long time at what he had created. He smiled and nodded. He knew what he would do. He didn't cut the paper or fold it this time. Instead, he rolled up the scroll and tied it with a red ribbon. Once more, Mi Fei trudged along the narrow mountain path. The enormous beast lay waiting, its great length coiled around the mountaintop. Opening its wide mouth lined with pointed yellow teeth, the dragon said, Well, am I to eat you for dinner? Mi Fei held out the picture he had created and said in a clear, firm voice, Love can move mountains, stretch the sky, calm the sea. Love brings light and life. When Mi Fei finished, he looked into Sui Jin's eyes. He was just astonished to see that the dragon was shrinking. In a whisper rather than a roar, Sui Jin said, Thank you, Mi Fei. You have found the way for me to sleep once more, for truly the strongest thing in the world is love. With that, the dragon became smaller and smaller until he disappeared. In his place, Mi Fei found a small paper dragon. He carefully placed it within the scroll to take back to his village. For the rest of his long life, Mi Fei continued to paint gods and festivals and portray the exploits of great heroes. He continued to paint portraits of the villagers he knew and loved. But whatever he painted, he always drew a small dragon in one corner to remind everyone of the strongest thing in the world. Now, Mifei and Sui Jin are Chinese, but there are people from all over the world and different cultures who believed in dragons. People from Scotland, the ancient Mayans believed in dragons, people from Africa and Australia, many, many cultures. We're going to be drawing Chinese dragons, but you can make any kind of modification to your dragon you want to make. I'm going to show you how to draw a dragon from the side, so profile. But if you would like to draw full frontal, you go for it. You're going to draw both eyes and the whole mouth and the whole nose that way. The supplies you're going to need today are a 9 by 18 piece of paper. If you're at home and you have 12 by 18, that's fine. You need a pencil, an eraser, and you need a black crayon or a Sharpie, and you may get to your oil pastels or crayons today. With your paper oriented horizontally or widthwise, you're going to draw an open mouth. So think of a V sideways on your paper. You're going to draw a big nose above that and a chin beneath it. On the top of the V or the top of the nose, you're going to draw an eye. If you want your dragon to be angry, you want to draw a pointier, narrower eye. If you want him to be sweet, you can draw a big open eye. The Chinese dragons have lots of frills and tentacles and strange things hanging from their nose. And they have a crown of it's like a gill thing or some kind of crown around their head. So I just drew that. And then I drew the teeth. If you want to draw a forked tongue or flames coming out of their mouth, you can. You can put spikes on their back. If you would like to draw arms or an arm on one side with claws, you can. You don't really have to because all dragons do not have arms. Or feet or legs. Some of them have little stubby hands and arms. You can draw that. My dragon is going off the paper, so you don't have to draw the whole dragon if you don't want. You can draw your dragon going off the paper. I'm going to draw the scales bigger on my dragon where he's larger and closer to the viewer, and then as it disappears off the paper, I'm going to draw my scales a little bit smaller. So the parts of the dragon that you need to have are teeth, probably flaring nostrils, some kind of forked tongue, possibly, or smoke breathing or breathing fire. He needs to have eyes and, did I say nostril? He needs to have scales, and he could have some kind of frills or tentacles hanging around his head and eyes. My clouds in the background with the spirals in them are also stylized Chinese-looking clouds. In ancient Chinese folklore and mythology, the dragons were the protectors of all the waters. They often had 4 legs, but like I said, they don't have to. So you can make your dragon however you want to make him. They're also sometimes a symbol of power, strength, and good luck. We're going to add color to our dragons next class. If you have time today and you want to start coloring them with oil pastels or crayons, you can. Bye, boys and girls.